I'm still Nunnu Karppinen or Johanna from Audiovisual Finland, but since there is a slight change or maybe partly another set of participants, I want to welcome you also to this afternoon and to our jointly hosted session with the Finnish Film Affair, Tekes and us at Audiovisual Finland. There are still some seats here in front row. You're more than welcome to come and fill them. But without further ado, I think we'll kick this session off. Those who were in the wonderful morning session already met our moderator guru, Adam Leipzig, who is a seasoned producer, distributor, and production executive from LA. Why don't you join already the spotlight with me, Adam? The breathtaking list of credits.
Best offer I've had all day. Join the spotlight
exactly.
with you.
Fantastic. Glad you have you back in Helsinki. We really appreciate the fact that you continue taking the time to join us from your busy schedule in LA. But Adam has a very impressive list of 20-30 credits to his shoulders, films including Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. On documentary side, there's the new A Plastic Ocean, the Dead Poets Society, and the likes, and the list of BAFTA, Emmy, Golden Globe, etc. nominations go beyond its tens and tens of nominations that you have. So we are honored to have you.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here.
Great. So about the session, it is being live streamed as we speak. So I kindly ask you guys to ask questions. We invite lively discussions, but please ask them as loudly as possible. And then panelists and Adam to repeat the question on mic. But
will do.
Let's get going then.
Okay,
great.
Thanks. Thank you so much. All right. Hi, everybody. For those of you who were here this morning, welcome back. For those of you who were not here this morning, welcome. We have some pretty amazing panelists. So if I may invite you all to just come up here and join us, have seats, and we're going to get going. Today's panel is about being represented. Agents, managers, what it means to be represented, how one gets represented, why one wants to be represented, and how the whole thing works. And we're just going to start. With some questions. I invite people as we're going. If you have questions as we go, shoot your hand up, and I'm going to try to get to every question that you have. We have lots of expertise in a lot of areas here behind me. So I am just going to. I'm just going to start here. Sure. Here, every mic is live, by the way. There's 2 mics over there for you guys, and. Yeah. Okay. So here we're gonna start. So you can introduce yourselves, but I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in the context of a question. The question is, how do you find the people you represent? So if you would start with talking for a moment about your company, and then how you find the people that you choose to represent, then we'll just go there, and we're gonna just keep it going. So, beginning over here, Dana O'Keefe, Cinetic Media. Tell us a moment about what Cinetic does, what you do there, and how you find people that you choose to represent.
Sure. Hey, how's it going? My name is Dana. So my company Cinetic is based in the U.S. We have offices in Los Angeles, New York City. I actually live in Stockholm, which explains my presence here today. We function as a sales agent for films into North America. We do single picture financing. We have a consulting group. And we manage directors and produce films occasionally. So I focus on representation of directors. And yeah, in essence, we're at the intersection of a few different areas of the process. So we have a tracking apparatus, and we monitor films from development through post-production. We cover all of the major international film festivals, and it's a needle in a haystack kind of thing. You keep your ear to the ground, and you come to places like this and meet people, and try to find the person that you believe can cross over, and that's why we're here.
What is a tracking apparatus?
it's like almost like a human intelligence organization. It's like you gather as much information as you can about a project, and you use the relationships you have to learn more about various aspects of it, and you stay in contact with the producers and filmmakers and try to see material from the film as it's coming together. And we're evaluating it, for various different purposes. We may have an opportunity to sell the film, in which case we'll make an assessment about the film's distribution potential in North America. We may not feel that it has significant potential from a distribution standpoint. We may be interested in starting a relationship with the filmmaker, and that becomes a separate conversation. But those are, that's a totally different level of commitment. And we're a boutique company. We take our commitments very seriously, so you have to be, careful about making those. But yeah, I mean, in essence, we perform a range of services, but are designed to kind of be a one-stop shop for independent filmmakers.
Thank you. Okay, so Camille McCurry from United Agents.
Hi, I'm Camille. So I'm an agent at United Agents. We're an independent talent and literary agency. We're based in London. We're a full-service talent and literary agency. We represent writers, directors, authors, actors, and below the line as well. My particular focus is on writers and directors. I mean, I'm always looking for new talent, and as Dina said, we scour festivals all over the world. It's a lot of talking to people, friends in the industry, building relationships with sales agents, with distributors, with festival programmers. Figuring out who people are excited about. Watching a lot of shorts. You often have to be ahead of the festivals, because by the time films are coming into festivals, a lot of the talent is already wrapped. So it's a lot of kind of doing research, watching a lot of shorts, we're just talent can come from anywhere, so we're always looking.
And Peter Trinh from ICM Partners.
Morning. Can you guys hear me? I'm Peter Trinh. I'm Managing Director of the International and Independent Film Group at ICM Partners. ICM, as some of you may know, is one of the world's largest talent and literary agencies in the world. We're full service, every area you can think of. We have clients and artists or, creative talent behind. But I would say, in terms of discovering new talent and stuff, a lot of it is just by nature, since I'm going to a lot of the major festivals. It'll be that, looking for new talent at those types of venues and environments. And then also it's a business of relationships, like they said. A lot could be from referrals from clients, referrals from managers, or referrals from producers or programmers, or anything that we know as filter mechanisms that can sort of tell my colleagues and I, hey, we just saw something, you need to check this out, because it could be a potential new client for the agency.
So we know who we're talking with today. Just out of curiosity, show of hands, how many people in the house today have representation with an agent or a manager of any kind? It feels like maybe 15%. And how many people in the house are directors? Lots of directors. How many people are producers? Lots of producers. Writers? And actors. I think we have about 25% in each of those quadrants.
Seems like there's some multi-hyphenates.
Yeah. Lots of talented people. Peter, I wonder if you could go, maybe you could go into, let's just dig a little bit deeper about how each of you find someone that you want to represent. And maybe each of you could pick a client that you have recently signed or would be relevant for this group, and tell the story about how that person came across your radar and maybe how you're working with that person now. Would you mind starting, Peter?
Sure. I'll bring up one specific example. About probably 8 or 9 years ago, I watched this fantastic Israeli movie called Lebanon. And, I thought it was fantastic, and, we created a team inside the agency to go after that specific filmmaker. We ended up, sitting down with him and, had a great, meeting where he ended up signing with us. So today, as some of you may know, he's got a new film in the festival circuit that just won, for example, the Venice Film Festival, the Grand Jury Prize, and also just this week sweeped the Israeli Oscars, also known as the Ophir Awards. So, he was just someone, when I first watched that first film of his, I found like it just to be a masterpiece and so innovative and just, it's, amazing that, we pursued him, we sat down with him, he signed with us. Through the development of this next movie called Foxtrot, as you may know, we read the script, worked with them along the way, and he ended up making it. It was a co-pro of a lot of countries and a lot of great producers involved, and his talent is just a testament because this film is getting a lot of much deserved accolades presently. So,
Thanks, Camille. What about you? Maybe the gentleman who directed Rams.
So we started working with Grímur O'Connorson, who's the director of the film Rams, which is an Icelandic film that debuted at Cannes in 2015 and won the Certain Regard Prize there. We absolutely fell in love with the film. As a lot of people did, and it went on to win many awards on the festival circuit that year. And he's someone that we're working with our friends at ICM with, and really, when you're coming off the back of a lot of festival success, it's really figuring out what is the best next step for that filmmaker. You're being set in a lot of projects, a lot of material. So it's really kind of going through that, thinking carefully about the next steps, what sort of film you want to make next, whether it's something you want to develop yourself, whether it's an idea, if you want to work with another writer, kind of building the team around them. So really that's a conversation that we have with every single filmmaker, and especially someone who's perhaps moving into their first English language film.
Right. So without going to specifics or things in the future that you can't talk about, but just in a general sense, when you're working with a filmmaker and trying to decide what is the next right step for that person's career, what are the kind of issues that you help the filmmaker evaluate? Like that seems like there's so many possibilities. And if you make the wrong choice, you could end up in movie jail for 10 years. So how do you help avoid movie jail?
Yeah, I mean, it's you have to be careful, and you have to. I think it's really about building the right team, working with the right producers, finding the right material is paramount. So whether it's a script that you fall in love with, or whether it's an idea that a filmmaker has, and you think, well, what is the best way that we can develop this idea? Who would be a good writer, collaborator, especially if you're a filmmaker a director who has been writing as well. It's very important to find people that you can collaborate with. And so really it's the material and the team. Those are the two most important things.
And this really begins to get into what's the working relationship that you have with your clients. Dana, maybe you could just pick up that thread. Sure. With an example, maybe Borg McEnroe, and maybe tell people what that is.
Sure, yeah. So, the most immediate example that comes to mind is that I've worked with the director of Borg McEnroe for a number of years. His name is Jonas Metz. He's based in Copenhagen. Borg McEnroe was the opening night film of the Toronto Film Festival this year, which was wonderful for all involved. And, that represents the culmination of, years of working together. I started working with him. He made, as probably know, he made a documentary called Armadillo a number of years ago. It was an incredible movie about Danish combat troops in Afghanistan, and just was like completely blown away by it. Sort of a documentary that had uses like the grammar of narrative filmmaking, but transitioning someone from working in documentary into narrative feature is challenging. It's not an overnight process. We went down the road on a lot of different projects. He ended up directing an episode of True Detective, but then finally this opportunity came along. And it's, it's partially English language, partially Swedish language. It's sort of, it's the right crossover project. But I mean, I think and it went over really well at Toronto. So now I think, there are major opportunities in store for him, and the future is bright. But with respect to the question that you posed, I mean, I think that, I always gravitate towards working with international filmmakers as they're sort of transitioning into working outside of their country of origin, or figuring out that kind of navigating the perilous waters of working in the U.S. and trying to identify trustworthy people that they can either be represented by or producing partners, and sort of facilitating those relationships. But it can be an extremely disorienting process, because if you have a film that sort of pops out of the festival circuit, suddenly you're presented with various opportunities, and there's a lot of pressure to take a job. But that it's a critical juncture in the process. So if you make the wrong decision, it's very, very costly. So I think it is exactly what Camille was saying. You have to make sure that whoever is advising you, whether those are agents, managers, producing partners, friends, whatever it is, you have to be able to rely on that guidance, because it's really easy to get spun, and a lot of people think they know what's in your best interest. But the impact that decision makes will have a lasting effect. So you have to proceed with caution.
Because very often the second film, what we call the sophomore film, is a disappointment compared to that first film, and it's about how do you avoid that second film disappointment. So this is a very relevant. Both how you find people to represent and how you work with them has been particularly relevant for directors. We have people with different creative talents in the house as well. In your company, do any of you represent actors?
I do not. I have a colleague who represents actors.
And Camille?
Our agency does, but
But you do not personally. And do you?
I'm on teams for actors, yes.
Right. All right. So maybe let me just kick it to you, and if either of you want to comment based on what your colleagues do, you've talked a little bit about how directors come to your attention. How do actors come to the attention of an agency like yours, Peter, to the point where you might say we would like to represent you?
It's pretty similar to this. So I'll give you an example. At film festivals, we'll have talent covering agents and also lit covering agents, and what they'll do is they're tasked with pretty much trying to watch everything, right? And so, we'll send out, for example, whether it be a certain festival, we'll send out 25 agents, and those agents will go out and scour between the films that they have clients in, or the films that we're hearing good buzz about. We'll go out and just investigate every short, feature, doc, etc., and report back. And if there's
And not to interrupt your flow, could you just explain what is a lit agent versus a talent agent in terms of the kind of people that they represent?
Yeah. So lit agents are traditionally referred to as agents that primarily represent writers and directors. Talent agents are primarily actors.
Right.
So, but then there's also other types of agents that you can think of. Production agents that represent DPs, ADs, et cetera. So there's a various amount of agents, but today, you'll see some sort of multi-hyphenate agents too that represent, clients from across the board. So,
right.
But that's the common sort of definition for each agent.
And in your agencies, I know you don't personally work with actors. Do you have what is the sense of how actors come to the attention of your groups? Camille?
Yeah, similarly. Our actors agents are covering the same festivals, and if I see something that a film that I've loved, or that I'm tracking the director for, I'll mention it to a colleague and say, look, you should check this out. There's a lot of information sharing within the agency, and we're always kind of recommending things to each other.
So it sounds as though, if I were an actor, what I would be hearing is, I shouldn't send you my reel. You really want to see me in a film that's playing someplace where it's significant. Is that correct?
Well, I'm going to answer.
Please.
So here's the reality. You can send your reel to big agencies and stuff. The chances of them actually focusing on it or paying attention to it is probably going to be minimal, to be honest with you, because, for example, the major agencies will have unsolicited materials policies, for example. So when we talk about this being a business of relationships and a business of filters, that's why it's put in place. Because, I'll walk through I'll give you like a common like sort of rundown of my day. I get about 500 emails a day. So I'm in about this is if I'm in LA, when I'm not traveling. I'll get about 5 to 7 meetings, and then I'll run through about 75 to 100 calls on average. So you can only imagine the volume that agents or managers have. Managers may have a little less volume because, I don't know, Dana, like what your average day is, but, but for example, Dana's in Stockholm, like I can only imagine how crazy his day is. But the reality is like our jobs are not jobs. Our jobs are lifestyles. And what you guys are choosing to do is not a job. It's a lifestyle. So the reality is as you become more and more successful, you're going to realize that type of like, volume too. But it's, dependent on what you want in your life. So.
Do you have a comment on that, Dana?
I mean, all I was going to say is that based on, my experience, I feel like, it's always about, the amount, there's a lot of work involved. And so it's about, the building of the relationship with the client is a long-term, proposition. And there's sort of strength in numbers at that early stage of the game. So I'm sure we were inevitably headed in this direction, but there's often a question about why do people have both agents and managers in the U.S. or in the UK?
That's exactly where we were going, because Peter and Camille, you're agents. Dana, you're a manager. It'd be great to explain what the difference is and what you each do.
Yeah, I mean, there's a conventional wisdom about it, but that belies other, I think, nuances. But management companies are typically smaller. Agencies are larger organizations. Managers can produce. Agents cannot produce. Agencies' job. Agents have many clients. They're on hundreds of calls and emails all day long. So they procure the work, and traditionally the manager's role is to sort of work on a more day-to-day level and a kind of semi-producerial way with the client to sort of move things forward. Because just to take the example that we're talking about with an actor, which is actually not my area of expertise, there's a lot of work involved to sort of get to the point where that relationship is actionable and monetizable in a way that's real. So you sort of need a group of people that are out there as your advocates, in the community, contextualizing your work, because you have to push. It's very competitive. So the thinking has evolved to the point where it's like, if someone has taken interest in you and I have a shorthand with her and we get along and we think this client has potential, then us working together to sort of try to make something happen is going to be more effective than you being on your own. And whatever additional commission you have to sort of pay at that early gestational stage of your career is kind of worth it for the return you get on having someone who is having a team of people who are out there pounding the pavement trying to break through the noise. And yeah.
The word team keeps coming up in our discussion, which is great, because nobody does anything alone at all in this business. You spoke about the volume, and Peter, you talked about this extraordinary volume of calls and meetings and input that you have. Is it true that agents in general have more clients than managers do? And do you feel comfortable talking about how many people you have to, you work with in representing Peter and Camille versus Dana, how many people you work with on a regular basis? Just so we could try to quantify that for the group?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the reality that agents the tendency is to have more clients. They're much larger organizations, and I would say that a good manager's job is to work with the client and the agent to try to sort of harness the massive resources of the agency to try to utilize it to its greatest effect. So what I've found is just that you're always, the filmmakers require, or actors require, a lot of time and attention. The agents don't always have that bandwidth because of the volume of business that they need to conduct. And so a lot of the strategizing and debating and positioning and working on development materials and getting all that stuff ready sort of falls to the manager, and we sort of get it to a point where it's ready to go. And then then we sort of try to get in lockstep with the agent and sort of use their really targeted energies to try to execute the plan.
Any other comment on that? No.
I mean, I would say in the UK, I would say we're sort of somewhere between, we're kind of a hybrid of agent and manager.
I think so, yeah.
The core business is obviously, we're representing the interests of the talent, but equally we are, managing careers. We sign people early on and we help build careers from the ground upwards. We have to be very proactive, very entrepreneurial in, creating opportunities for our clients. We typically, my list is around, 35 clients, something like that. Certainly, I'm sure you can talk about the kind of the volume at the US agencies.
So, I think this is a good commentary to add to this notion. So, there's 4 big agencies in America specifically, and those agencies I look at as epicenters of information. Mm-hmm. And so when all this information is flowing in and out of these big agencies, and so we actually do share clients with both of these companies, and the best way to sort of like explain it to you guys is like it's using teamwork and strategy with these companies and the clients that we share to find a common goal for what the specific client's like next project is, or what the specific client's next project could be. So it's strategizing from a long-term perspective. So typical agents, at big agencies could have 60 to 80 clients, be on teams for 60 to 80 clients. Personally, I tend to have less because I also work in the international and independent film group, packaging and structuring finance for films. And so in a lot of ways, I'm working with all the clients of the agency. But with clients specifically that I'm working to navigate their career and also to navigate certain projects that they're working on or that they're engaged in currently, it's a lot less for me personally. So.
All right, so we've talked for about a half hour. It's a great time for us to reach out and just check in with you. 2 questions. Is there anything we've talked about that doesn't make sense, needs to be clearer? I know that we're talking fast, we're talking in English, and at the same time, we would also love to know if at this point there are any questions that you have. Yes?
When you talk about managing the client, what are the concrete things you do with this client?
So the question is, when you talk about managing clients, could you say some concrete things? I guess it's, if we can get to real examples, things that you feel comfortable talking about, but being less general and more specific, I think that would be useful. Go ahead, please.
I'll dive into that. Here's how the process starts. You see a movie, you love it, you're like, I have to work with this person, I believe in them, we're gonna figure something out together. Usually the first exercise is this film does not have distribution. There's no visibility and awareness of this movie. It's in a film festival and it's gonna come and go. So the first thing is, what's the situation with distribution in North America? Because that impacts the international visibility and profile of the film. So it's using the relationships you have with US distributors, sales agents, et cetera, to try to, move that process forward, secure distribution for the film. That's the foundation that will create the, critical awareness of the movie, which will sort of get you to the next step. Once the film's distribution strategy is set, you sort of turn your attention to what happens next, and you start, educating people that you work with about that filmmaker. So whether that's chaperoning the process of them signing with an agency, or identifying a producing partner, or obtaining development financing, optioning underlying rights to material, you name it. Whatever, it's dictated by the preferences of the client, and it's really a kind of brick by brick process that sort of gets you to the next stage of the game, which probably isn't just getting an open directing assignment from a studio handed to you. That's the exception to the rule. It's sort of everything that happens between that point and getting there is the sort of the sort of nitty gritty of the day to day.
And for those of you who are here for the morning panel, just as we talked about every distribution and marketing strategy for a movie being bespoke and custom for that movie, so too it is with every client. Every client is different, every artist is different, and the strategy, the stepping stones, the path is going to be different. The team is going to be different. But you also one of the other things that Dana just talked about is that there's a real collaboration in the film sales component, as well as just the client representation component. And that's something that Cinetic is it's part of Cinetic's genetics in how you all came to be, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? Okay, so we talked about directors and actors, how they come to your attention. Do writers ever come to your attention other than with films that are already made?
Yeah, I mean, we are always looking for great material, and if someone has written a great spec script, that's usually a good way to start. Again, it's usually through recommendations from producers that we're working with, or sales agents who've come across a great script that's landed on their desks. Or writers who are working with directors that we're working with. Also there's a big conversion rate from theater to screenwriting as well. So playwrights we're always looking at as well. That's
right. And I assume you do not accept unsolicited material either, correct? Or do you?
Technically, no, we don't. But occasionally you'll get a letter from someone that stands out, and you'll take a look. But usually, typically, it's from producer recommendations.
I was just going to add, also, like, there are other filter mechanisms, as we call them, that the agencies and management companies will look at. Like, for example, they'll look at who won the Nichols Awards, or who won, who's on the blacklist that doesn't have representation, things like that. So, we'll look at things like that on top of, like, the relationships that, the specific agency or agents or managers may have. So.
About a quarter of the people raise their hands who are producers. Do producers ever just get representation as producers?
So, I represent some producer financiers. So the reality is they have a financing engine behind them. So, part of that, representation is helping them to negotiate, the structure behind the film investments that they do and the things that they produce. Or if they're jumping on a specific project, negotiating their producing deal. So
one of the things that you also mentioned is that there are some clients that you share among the participants on this panel. Could you talk about what a co-representation relationship means at your level and how that works? Either Peter or Camille?
Again, it just really comes down to relationships, and I think, we spend a lot of time building up great relationships with our, with our US co-reps, and it's really about, building trust and getting to know their taste, and and likewise with, I co-represent quite a few clients with European agents as well. So it's really just spending time focusing on building up those relationships over time.
How important is it for you to have a partner representative in the U.S. For your directing clients?
Yeah, I would say probably most of my directors have U.S. co-rep. As I said, we work with ICM, we work with several of the other agencies as well, and management companies. It's very important, but the most important thing is that you work as a team, and we're constantly sharing information and talking. We talk on the phone, almost every day, and we come up with a plan, and it's really about a team effort.
Basic difference is agents wear suits, managers wear sneakers.
Yes.
But you need both.
I'm not wearing socks, though. Does that count?
Yeah. You get some street cred for that.
I'm trying to be cool. I'm wearing socks.
So when we did a little straw poll at the beginning, and we asked how many people in the audience are currently represented, only a few hands went up. So I imagine many people are here at some point hoping to be represented to move to the next stage of your careers. You have worked, you may have future clients in this house. We don't know. But to shorten the learning curve for people and to make those relationships easier, now let's talk a little bit about the relationship between you and the people you represent, and what makes those relationships really excellent when they are excellent, because I know sometimes they're great and sometimes they could be wanting for more. When you're working with new clients and there's a learning curve, maybe each of you could talk about one or two of the things that you really wish people knew early, because it would help you work with them for the future. And Dana, could you start with that?
Sure. I mean, I think life is good here in Scandinavia. Very high standard of living. You have to really want to go for it, because you can continue to make films here, and those films will be widely seen. It's a totally different proposition to sort of put yourself in the situation of going out and trying to get these projects, specifically with respect to making films in the U.S. And these are. You get into a lot of situations where, the pressurized conversations with people making judgments in a very short period of time. So you don't get two bites at the apple. So one of the things that's sort of a process when we start working together is figuring out, how to sort of handle how to sort of position things within many of these conversations. And you learn the hard way is the truth. You have to go out there and put yourself in the room a few times, and it's not going to happen. But the more you do that, the curve is very steep. People adapt to that process. But I mean, some people don't have that, inclination or disposition to begin with. They just sort of want to be left alone to make their movie, and that's totally fine. But that's that's just a different way of working than what we're kind of talking about, because this is the effort yield ratio. It's like we have to we're going to go all in and try to make something happen, and that's going to take a few years to mature. Until that sort of bears fruit. So it's really just about the expectation level being established at the beginning properly, so that we sort of understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and what we're working towards together.
Focus and expectation. It's going to take a long time. That it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It's a highly unpredictable process.
Yeah.
It's feast or famine. It can go both ways.
Camille.
I mean, I would say, communication is really key, and you really need to have a conversation from the beginning about where the filmmaker wants to go and what they want to do. And I think it's important that the filmmaker really has an idea of their voice and what it is that is unique about them, that they are bringing to the table, and how to nurture that, and how to make them. If you've done your first film, how do you move forward to make the second film? And I think it's important. I also think it's important for filmmakers to see a lot of films, to kind of know what's out there, to really learn about the industry as well. Take time to do that. A lot of the best filmmakers really, understand the industry and how it works. So seeing a lot of films, just knowing what people are talking about. If you're a shorts director who's moving into making their debut feature, see what's out there. What are people talking about? If it's just really about making a film that connects with an audience. That really resonates at, whether it's at a festival or just really about finding an audience.
I thought of something else that's important to add. Just conversely, from your standpoint, in engaging with people who purport to want to represent you, I think fundamentally it's a trust thing, because you're going to entrust, this person is going to be your advocate. They're going to go out into the world on your behalf and be communicating and representing that they understand what your intentions are. So I think, there are a lot of people who, when a movie pops, they sort of come out of the woodwork, and there are all these people who are telling you that, your movie is so great, and they're dying to work with you, and it's kind of hard to differentiate, and some of those people, they're not that they have ulterior motives, but they're sent, to find something, and they don't want to come home empty-handed, and this fits the bill, and so let's work together. And I think that you're investing a lot in that relationship. So I think it's important to take your time and to make sure that you've given everybody a kind of fair shot, because it's going to come down to the fit more than anything. Can you talk to this person? Can you actually tell them the truth? I don't know how to finish this project or whatever, because they're going to get into situations where you're going to have to be able to confide in one another. So I think it's, and sometimes that's why it's kind of good to have more than one person on the team, because the sort of groups can help keep each other, motivated and engaged and, transparent about, what's happening.
What a great description of the process. Agree. Yeah, Peter.
So they stole my answers. Yeah. But I actually agree with them. So just adding on top of that, like knowing where you fit, in the film or TV space is a really good thing to know before you start getting representation. And just to add, I say this sometimes to some of my clients, but it's not how fast we get that deal done. It's about getting the deal right. So, oftentimes, a deal can come up and they're like, let's just close this tomorrow. And I'm like, wait a second, let's get the deal right. And that the deal getting right could take a couple weeks even.
Or
right?
longer.
Yeah. That'll drive me personally crazy because I'm impatient, but but you know what I mean. It's about getting the deal right, and that falls into like having a strategy, a long-term strategy of where a specific person's career is going to go, right? So.
Yeah, one of my mentors told me once that the only deals that hurt you are the deals you make. But could you go a little bit more detail of when you say where you fit in the film or TV space? What do you mean by that? Where do you fit in the TV or film space?
Oftentimes, there's specific clients that want to do everything, right? And so, you're only one person, and the reality is you have a team behind you. So let's make something really, really successful, and then start expanding on the business. So that's a perfect example of where you fit in the film space. So
you don't want a director to come and say, hey, I can direct anything, just give me what you got.
Because you can't go to every buyer or every studio and say he can do anything, he or she can do anything, right? But the reality is they're going to look at the past work and sort of say, hey, that specific person's good at this,
right?
Let's put them up for this, right? And then let's get that person the next job, right? So after that, if they want to expand into doing something else, absolutely. Representation is about making sure your career grows, and your career growth is based on not pigeonholing you into one sort of box, right? So.
And I think specifically with respect to emerging talent, there isn't a track record to, look to. So you're having to try to convince someone else or another group to really take a shot. And, the perfect situation or the thing I think that I find I'm always looking for, and I'm sure the same is true for the rest of the people here, is that, a situation where you can say there's something unique about this director's candidacy for this specific opportunity that differentiates them from everybody else or the usual suspects or more established filmmakers, so that you can sort of, overcome whatever knee-jerk reaction or obstacle there is to sort of, getting any traction with, someone who hasn't, made an English language film before or, has a proven track record at the box office.
Here's the exciting thing today. The business is becoming more and more global. And so the reality is the buyers in the studios are becoming more open to international talent, whether you're a director, writer, or actor. And so representatives are using that, to our advantage, because the reality is it doesn't matter where you're from. If you're talented, you're talented. And it's about making sure that specific studio exec, financier, buyer knows it, and being able to get you that next job. So,
Dana, one of the things that you were telling me earlier is people spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to get represented, and really the best way to get represented is make something great, right?
Can't really add to that. It's just that simple.
I'm quoting you back to yourself, but I
think it was him.
I think it's worth hearing because it's. Whoever said it, it's...
Yeah, it's true. I mean, people want to see something they haven't seen before, so you just have to make a good movie.
Rises to the top.
You could sit here for an hour and hear all these platitudes, but that bottom line is, the work has to speak for itself. It has to stand out from the pack. It's extremely competitive. There's so much content out there in the world. I mean, think about how high the bar is, at least in the U.S., to go to a movie theater on a Friday night now, because there's all this, this war for premium exclusive content between all of these platforms. So, you've got to make something really good.
Well, I was going to say specific to that, I think sometimes when you're first starting off in your career as an artist, whether you're an actor, writer, producer, director, you get pigeonholed in this like thought that like I'm not going to progress because I don't have a representation. And the reality is like today, the technology, the access to soft monies, or like especially in this region, like that you have to, or like producers or filmmakers in this region that you have, shouldn't impede you from actually going out and making something amazing. And the reality is, like, if you make a great short film, exerting all the energy that you would have exerted into like actually going like, hey, I'm gonna send 300 emails today and send this reel of this like student film I shot 10 years ago, which I'm like sort of like happy about,
right,
but it'll get me representation, is probably not the best way to spend your time. Maybe taking all that energy and exerting it into like, I've got this great fresh concept. I'm gonna, it's similar to like these specific filmmakers that I know I have access to. Let's see if they'll jump on board as an EP and stuff and help me sort of create a relationship so that later on when I want to get representation, they can give me access into like who represents them, etc. And make the thing. Because I can tell you make something great, you're gonna go, holy crap, how the hell did all these people get my phone number and email?
Right.
Because you know what? Like, if Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, like, I don't know, like all the other social media things, like we're going to find you, and you're going to go, whoa, and then you're going to go like, well, now how do I deal with all these people that like love me,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a highly subjective process. Like, how do you quantify the value of a work of art, or what criteria do you use to sort of, a lot of it is perceived value, and it's especially in Hollywood, it's an influencing machine. Everybody is sort of whispering in each other's ear and trying to leverage their perceived expertise, or having a piece of information or access to a project or a piece of material that nobody else has yet, and using that to sort of advance other designs. So it's creating something that feels like it has the energy around it that's going to create a conversation that will propel those things, and you'll feel it when the polarity is reversed, when they're coming at you instead of the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about finding, your original voice. What is unique about you as a filmmaker? Maybe it's, a story that we've heard, but from a different perspective. It's really just about, honing that. If you're making your first film, it's about working with smart, young, emerging producers. And if you make something great, people will see it. I mean, it's as simple as that.
If I were to say it back to you, maybe another way to say it is, don't make what you think other people want to see.
Exactly.
Make what you really have to make, because that's who you are and that's the value you bring.
Make what you want to make, because the reality is doing something good to great is a little bit more effort, and that effort is being passionate about that specific thing you're about to make.
Yeah.
So it could be like something that's not even the norm, and you all make it, and it becomes fantastic, and then you get all of our calls, and then like you're like, oh, should I just go with all three?
Maybe. More questions from the house. Yes, please.
What is the typical fee you charge, and if you have a correct, how do you split that fee? In terms of,
Okay, so in the green room, we're saying, are we really going to get into the fee structure? But we just got a fee question. So the question is, what is the typical fee?
Yeah, have you signed a note of 1 billion euros and the payable? And,
what is the typical fee? And when there is co-representation, how is that divvied up? Yeah?
You guys know the basic layers of representation.
Let's just run it down. Let's start basic. Yeah. Let's start basic, and then we can get sophisticated.
All right. So there's agents, and agents typically charge 10%, right? There's managers, personal managers, right? Because there's two types of managers. So personal managers will charge a 10% fee too. Business managers are when your career starts evolving and you need to think about taxes and payments and all that stuff. You hire that person, right? And then there's also publicists that you hire. There's usually a set retainer. And then there's also attorneys that you hire, right? So when you hire an attorney, it's about 5%. So those are the basic layers of representation. So
and often, someone has representation in their territory or country of origin, and then they, if they want to work in the U.S., they sort of consider the option of taking on both an agent and a manager, or one or the other. And in that, there are lots of different permutations and variables and reasons why you would do one thing versus the other. But in a situation where someone designates, those three different parties to represent them, then, an equitable fee split has to be, arrived at by all parties. But in essence, individually, all agencies and management companies both charge 10% traditionally.
Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay, great. Other questions? Okay, I'm just gonna start with you, and we're gonna work our way. Yes, please. What's your name?
Roxana.
Hey, Rosanna, what's your question?
My question is, what are the pitfalls of finding the right team since the beginning, so that consequently you wouldn't end up in movie jail?
Oh, what are the
Also finding the right people, the right people.
really the pitfalls of finding the wrong people, right?
I mean, like, okay, how to know the agent is good?
How do you know that? Okay, so let's take the scenario. One of these people just made something that is fantastic, and they have the rush that you just described, where they're getting lots of calls from lots of people. How do they figure out who they should really go with? That's really what your question is. How do you know who's the right person to begin to lead the team that's going to be built around you?
I mean, one obvious thing to do is to talk about, the projects and situations that person has been in previously. If you sort of reverse engineer the trajectory of another filmmaker whose work you admire or identify with, who is represented by that person, and they can then articulate for you, at what point did they enter that person's, career, and what was their role in, whatever that subsequent project was. And that's the sort of way where you can sort of get down to, on a granular level, what was the involvement. Another way that people tend to do it, which is, I think has mixed results, is as they're going through the dog and pony show with different agents and managers, they ask about the other parties, and of course, you get very loaded answers. So I would say that that should be taken with a grain of salt. Yeah.
Camille, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what Dana said, and it just comes down to getting into a conversation with someone and really, getting to understand them as a filmmaker, and really being passionate about their work. Especially early on, you really have to get out there and sell this filmmaker early on, and it's really, a lot of it comes down to, other filmmakers that you represent, and, understanding where that person wants to go. And, really just, do you connect with this person?
So Peter, let me put a little spin on this, because when there is a director that everybody wants, you are all very convincing. You're really good at your job. You're really good at sitting with that person and saying all the right things to make it seem as though you are the right person to work with. In that context, can you maybe give Rosanna some further tips about how to pierce through the fact that you guys are really good at being convincing to figure out if you're really the right person?
Call them at 1 a.m. on a Saturday.
Well, it's not about person, it's about team, actually. So what happens is, if you're a filmmaker that we're actually going out to, want to sign, we're going to cast the right team. So you're actually going to see a compilation of agents from, my agency specifically, that sit down with you, and, you get to see how personable we are, whether we're the right personality for you. And, the reality is, then you should do your own homework as well, because, the great thing about the internet today is, you can see, you can log on to IMDb Pro or Studio System and see, oh, hey, I want my career, I love these kind of filmmakers, and this is the type of voice that I want later down the road. Who represents those people, right? And, that could be a factor in, your decision making. But the reality is, it's about the agency or the management company casting the right people in the room, so that you guys get along, essentially.
I think it's also just you can tell that this person takes what he does very seriously. It's, you have to, you have to be convinced someone's going to wake up every day and think about the situation that we're in, and how are we going to, figure out how to get to the next point. Because that's what it is. It's just internalizing the responsibility of, dealing all the time. and you just have to look someone in the eyes and believe that they're going to do that, and that that they're going to ride out the ups and downs.
Right. Question. Yes. What's your name?
My name is Sarah.
Hi, Laura.
I'm director and want to know a little bit more about, you talked about trust and such, but from your point of view, what is a director, your collaboration, is that a director, in your point of view, to director from hell and director, like a dream director to work with?
All right. So the question is from Laura, who is a director herself. What is a director from hell versus what is a dream director from your point of view?
I mean,
no names need to be mentioned in this
I
answer.
think unmanageable expectations. It's sort of like, so this was alluded to before, someone who wants, everything all the time, who's relentless. There are no boundaries in the relationship, second guessing every possible decision, undermining, like those sort of tendencies. That's not fun. That doesn't motivate you to want to do good work. Life is too short for that, honestly. Although, if you really believe in someone's abilities and talent, and as it happens, certain highly qualified directors are extremely, neurotic and controlling like that, and in certain instances, you tolerate that because it's in the service of, creating meaningful work that you feel, you want to be a part of. But that's the exception to the rule, I would say, at this stage of the game, at least for me. I'd rather, be really, you really be proud and enjoy the accomplishments together. So you really just want someone who's on the same page with you about, doing the work, and that you feel that you're in the trenches with together. I mean, you have a business relationship. Your role is to perform certain functions on their behalf, and in turn, you commission, part of their salary. But functionally, it's just the feeling of being shoulder to shoulder, as opposed to a feeling more of just total accountability. At least personally, that dynamic is not as appealing to me.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, you feel like you're going on a journey together, right? It's, I think the best working relationships are, ones where you have great communication, you know exactly, what each of you are doing, and just kind of, having a great line of communication.
Next question. Yes. Yes, please. Well, we'll start with, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Harista. Do you often get asked from studios or producers to search for certain talent or stories, or how do you deal with that sort of?
Do students and producers sometimes send you on a mission to go find a director or a writer or a story that they are specifically looking for?
I would say it's more like you find out that a project is going, and there are a lot of people vying for it, and it's more that all these organizations have executives who interact with the agencies and so on and so forth, and then we find out that a project is coming together, and then internally each management company or agency sort of does their analysis and tries to think about like what's the best candidate to put forward, and it's less that you hear that someone's looking for a specific type of filmmaker, I would say. Or it's more that you hear that a director has fallen off of a project, and you try to, Paul Greengrass has stepped off of this project. So then you sort of think about, like, who do I work with who, sort of has the DNA of that type of filmmaker, where you could make a case for, their candidacy for the project.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking to producers, studios, all the time, and so we have people constantly in touch with them. We know what their slate is. We know what's coming up. So yeah, there's a lot of information sharing.
So you remember what I said about epicenters of information earlier? So the major agencies, there's 4 big ones, right? So out of the 4, what happens is each studio or each buyer gets assigned a group of agents, right? And those agents actually cover that specific buyer, right? And what happens is there's assignments, or they'll know which one's in a writing phase to hire writers, right? So they suggest like specific writers for that. Or they'll know like when a script has been turned in, then it gets to the ODA phase, open directing assignment. So then they suggest directors for that. Or then when a director comes aboard, it turns in an open casting assignment. So then they start. This is specific to film, right? So TV is a little different, right? So then they start we start suggesting actor ideas. So it's an ongoing process to the onset. But then on top of that, agencies like, for example, ours, like we have the top book department of the agencies. And the reality is, when we know something is getting sold to a specific studio, we're already on top of that. because we have that information. So we're gonna, like, the next phase is essentially writing, right? Adapting the book into, you know, a movie or, you know, a miniseries, et cetera, et cetera. So.
And the perfect storm is when an agency package is coming together like that, where it's like it's come out of their book group. They found a director that they put on it. Now the talent department is trying to identify talent, you know, put into it. It's not, you know, they'll work with the different entities, but, you know, there'll be so much momentum behind making that thing happen that becomes a huge advantage.
So one of the biggest words that Danny just mentioned is packaging, right? Because in a lot of ways, you're going to start packaging things because you're going to create relationships in this room that, you know, you haven't had before, and you're going to package a short film together where you're producing, that person's directing, that person's writing. And you're going to see that actually strategy and skill of packaging throughout your career. So.
Yes.
All right. So, what are your thoughts on how best you think a producer or filmmaker or writer, as case may be, can best balance artistic space, the people's expectation, that's the audience expectation, as well as what other people are saying?
Let's see. How some.
I'm asking.
Yes.
What are their thoughts on how best a filmmaker or writer or producer can, you know, combine, you know, like walk the thin line between, you know, understanding your own space, you know, and then, you know, balance it with what the audience are expecting and what other people are saying.
In some ways, so the question is how does an artist balance what the artist wants to do versus what the audience expects, what the audience needs. It's that membrane between your personal creative drive and the fact that you're in a commercial universe and you have to sell tickets in order to survive.
Yeah, I mean, the film business it's art and commerce, and like the Venn diagram, like, is what you're looking for there, where those two things overlap, and that's the difference between, you know, a movie that nobody sees and, you know, something that connects with the zeitgeist. So people make films for different reasons, you know. There are people who make essay movies that, you know, are deeply personal explorations that aren't intended for an audience. I think it's just about being, you know, honest with yourself and clear. If your objective is to communicate, I mean, film is the most dynamic medium in the world. That's certainly why I like working in it, because people don't read books, unfortunately. They watch things, they watch cat videos, or they used to watch movies in theaters. So it's like, you know, the question is how to channel the enormous power of that medium in a way that communicates meaningfully, and I think, and also is a means of personal expression. And I think that's, you know, the best films have all those attributes, one way or the other. But yeah, I mean, it's an eternal question without a simple answer.
But it's also a question of scale, right? Because if you're a poet, you can go down to the local copy shop and for €5 publish your book. Right now with the money that you have in your wallet, so that's easy. But when you're making a movie and your budget is millions of euro or tens or hundreds of millions of euro, that's really when you've chosen something of scale, and therefore you are also choosing to be much more in that commercial space to express yourself. Next question. Okay, let's move to Toronto Film Festival. You were all at TIFF. It feels like just yesterday. You know, Toronto Film Festival, which happens in the second week of September in Toronto, which was, on the one hand, a little bit slower than it was in prior years, but still all of you had activity. You all had either films or directors that you were representing who had films or projects in the festival. So you were both representing and you were also selling and making deals. Love to hear your thoughts about what TIFF was like for you this year, and maybe how that suggests where the business may be heading, which could be of value for our audience, because TIFF is a truly international film festival. Peter, would you like to start?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, like, if you guys might know, so Toronto, what they did this year was actually reduce the amount of films that they were going to program. So their goal was to do about 20%. I think they were a little under that amount. But this year, you know, a general observation was a lot of the films that came to the festival came with distribution. So, you know, in terms of like what Adam's referring to as slow, the sales market was a little bit slower than, you know, it has been the years past as a result of that. But you saw new players come out of the marketplace, that actually competed for or jointly competed for specific films. And, one of note, for example, is 30 West, which is, actually a bunch of agents at another agency leaving and partnering with a film financier to start just a very, open investment slash, media finance company that would do a multitude of things, from financing films to acquiring movies to partnering up with distributors to acquire movies to, doing hospitality investments, et cetera, et cetera. But, for example, our ICM, specific to us, we had a really good slate, and we actually came into the market with a couple of them already pre-sold, just knowing what the market was going to be. And a note, for example, I mentioned earlier, I represent the filmmaker of Foxtrot, and so Samuel, we helped navigate that sale with Match Factory to Sony Picture Classics. So, and it was really, really competitive. And then on top of that, we also had, Bodied, which is another one of our clients, Joseph Kahn, who we signed, and Eminem produced that movie, and it won the Midnight Madness Award. And we have a bunch of offers on that, and we're just trying to figure out the right deal for that specifically.
How did Eminem come into that picture?
From the onset, a relationship that Joseph had with Eminem and his manager Paul. So.
And how important was Eminem's involvement for the profile of that movie?
Well, I don't know if you know the movie, but it's a battle rap movie, and it's a satire set in that world. So, if you're talking about, the king of rap, Eminem's one of the, predominant names that you think about, right? So obviously, having him lend his support from, a culture, art, and business standpoint is important. So,
Camille, how was TIFF for you?
Yeah, we had quite a few films there. So I represent Ronnie Sandal, who's the writer of Borg McEnroe, which is directed by Dana's client, Jonas Metz. We had Susanna White's A Woman Walks Ahead, and quite a few actors as well, Kate Winslet, and David Frean was there with his debut film as well. Yeah, I mean, I thought the presence of international filmmakers there was particularly strong this year, and it's especially the Discovery section. So I think that was really exciting to see.
What was were your clients who had films in the festival, were they there?
Yes.
And what was their experience? What do they do there?
Well, we're obviously there. We're setting up meetings ahead of time. We're getting them, out to meet everyone in the industry. It's obviously good to, use the momentum from the festival to for them to pitch things that they're working on, for instance.
What kind of people might they be people or companies might they be working with?
Producers and financiers, distributors, just really, getting, educating people about who they are. It's a chance for them to talk about their next projects, and likewise, maybe they've got something that might be a good fit.
Right. How many films did Cinetic have at TIFF this year? Do you know, Dana?
Probably, every year it's something like 6 to 8. I'm not sure exactly what the number was, because it depends. Sometimes we're selling movies, sometimes we just represent the director, sometimes we sort of have a corporate consulting relationship. National Geographic we work with these days, actually. A great documentary there about Jane Goodall. Brett Morgan directed. It's incredible. Amongst other things. Another documentary we're working on, really good, called Jim and Andy, directed by Chris Smith, about Jim Carrey portraying Andy Kaufman in Milos Forman's Men on the Moon, and having kind of a nervous breakdown, going into sort of in-depth performance. Anyway, it's sort of a lot of mix of stuff, but the thing I think it's most pertinent is the Borg McEnroe situation, which is, it is the first Scandinavian film that was the opening night film of Toronto. The Square won the Palme d'Or this year. It's in vogue at the moment. There's currency in the marketplace for films that are coming out of this part of the world, and that's an opportunity. So you guys are due. So that's why we're here. We're looking for what's next.
Yes, please.
Okay, so Ruben Östlund, of course, is in an extreme momentum right now, and he's done the whole trajectory of coming into Uncertain God, blah, 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 finally winning the Palme d'Or, and now he's the Swedish Oscar entry. We'll see if he gets nominated. His last film was shortlisted. Okay, so in this place, he's the king. So what should his next step be? Because someone like Daniel Espinosa, he made Slava Cash, everyone loved that. Then he made Safe House. It was a big success. He made Child 44, huge failure. So, I mean, how is Rubens, as an example, how should he navigate this? Because even though he's the king here, maybe he's the 10th name on a
Let's restate the question for the mic and then
in
go.
Hollywood. What should he do?
The question was specifically about the director of the Square, Ruben Östlund, and him having a kind of,
As an example.
moment of incredible opportunity, and that, other Scandinavian directors have, had similar opportunities in sort of what are the different, trajectories from this point. I think in his case, it's very clear he's not seeking an open directing assignment at a studio. He's a self-generating director, so he's an auteur filmmaker. So I think the question for him is really whether he is going to, make films using the resources within Scandinavia or Europe, or is he going to partner with, a U.S. studio to finance his next film, which I suspect is probably the case. Yes, he's gone through the process. I saw Involuntary a really long time ago. He sort of has moved up through those ranks, and I think paid his dues, and it's exciting to see him arrive at that moment. And yes, Daniel Spinoza as a filmmaker has a totally different trajectory. I think his sensibility is much more overtly commercial. He was, after making Snabba he was. And he wanted the open directing assignment. Safe House was like ready to go, and he stepped into that. And that, of course, then made him eligible for these other much larger scale opportunities. I don't know what he's up to after Life. I lost track. But anyway, he'll be back, I'm sure. I think that it's interesting. They're an interesting, comparison because they're so different in terms of their sensibility and orientation. And there are a handful of other Scandinavian directors who sort of have that clout in the marketplace. Thomas Alfredson's new film is coming out in the fall, Snowman. I'm sure it's going to be totally amazing. I don't know if that's really an answer to your question, but I think that Ruben is an exceptional case because of his proclivities as a director, and I think that that whatever happened with the Square has sort of touched enough of a nerve where I think he sort of crossed the threshold, and the U.S. companies who I saw him meeting with all throughout Toronto, they're all willing to take that shot, I think. So we'll see what happens, but I really have no idea, and I don't work with him. So
Great contrast. Next question. Who has a question they're really dying to ask? And they've been thinking about it for the past half hour.
Continue saying who from this Nordic region are the ones that everyone's talking about in Hollywood. Since we have this expertise, it's
Okay.
so nice to hear who's like the
So the question is, are there other artists in the media film space in the Nordic region that a lot of people are talking about right now? In Hollywood. In Hollywood? Does it have only in Hollywood? Only in Hollywood. She is only interested in Hollywood.
setting the bar very high. Well, I'm partial to the people that I work with. The other Swedish director I work with is Michael Marsman, who I happen to think is also an incredible director, and I'm very excited. He's attached to several English language projects. He's doing a TV series right now in Denmark. But it's hard to comment on people that you're not like directly involved with or working with. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of names bandied about, and I think we highlighted the ones that are most immediately relevant.
Well, I was going to say there's a multitude of names coming out of this region. For example, Dome, who did Tom of Finland, and he's doing the Tolkien biopic. So this region is there's a lot of great filmmakers, actors, writers coming out of this region, and Hollywood's paying attention. So the reality is there's a lot.
I would be remiss if I did not mention that we actually jointly with ICM represent an exciting director from this country who directed a short that we saw at Sundance. His name is Timu, and his film is called Fucking Bunnies. It's about Satanists. Maybe you've seen it. It's really awesome, and we're super excited about him.
Okay, so can I turn the question around? Who from this region is the international film community or Hollywood not paying attention to that they should be paying attention to, do you think?
Nice one. Right back at you.
Going to put you right back on the spot.
Yeah.
Okay, while you think about that, we're going to take the next question. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention one name. He's called Jani Volanen. I think he should get recognition from
Someone in the audience has recommended Jani Volanen. Okay, everybody take note.
Noted.
Thank you. Other nominations,
What
most
film
welcome.
should we see?
Okay, we got another.
Hold on a second. What film should we see?
At least he's done a TV series called Ihme Bantu. And they are working a lot of theater work in Helsinki.
Right.
few.
What's the
Yeah,
TV
for-
series
yeah.
called?
What's the TV series called?
Ihmebantu.
Okay.
Yeah, you tell us afterwards.
Okay.
Ninja Tyrberg. Definitely Ninja Tyrberg.
And what film should we see?
She's made 5 shorts. She's now working on her debut feature. It's being produced by Erik Hemmendorf, who's Ruben Östlund's producer, and it's about a Swedish girl trying to make it in the porn business in LA. And the shorts she's made are on a very low budget, super stylish, smart, kind of gender-bending, queer, entertaining, glossy.
Yeah, I've seen the materials. They're very compelling. I agree.
Okay, thank
Are
you.
you Tuva? No. you're not.
Thank you.
I just know.
Okay. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Anyone? No, but no secret questioners ready to raise their hand? All right, so to move towards our close, our business is changing so fast. What we would have said a year ago is different today, and what we might say next year will be different then. But if you were to look in your time capsule crystal ball and try to help the people in this audience who are preparing films now that really will not be ready to come to market for a year or 2, what kind of things could you suggest that they think about that can really prepare them for how our business is altering? I see you reach for a microphone, Peter. It's yours.
Well, I was just going to say, and you had this earlier, you had a VOD panel earlier, right?
Yeah.
But I would pay attention to the tech companies coming into the entertainment space. Because as you can see, like, I mean, Netflix DNA, for example, was a tech company, and they're global, essentially, right? And then now you're seeing Amazon, which was essentially a tech e-commerce company, they're going global. So you're going to see a lot of other companies, for example, Google, YouTube Red, those are global platforms. And that's, it's an exciting time, because so if you can address that and sort of analyze it and sort of calculate it into like what you guys want to do, it could be a good strategy, because I think there are going to be a couple other players. I think there are going to be like European companies that come in on it, or like, other like, companies as such. So
What would it mean to calculate players like that into what people in this room might want to do? What might that calculation mean?
there's not a traditional way, like, I mean, there's the traditional way of releasing films, right? You release it by region with like certain distributors and stuff. But with these new tech companies, you could do a worldwide release, So just think about that, and think about like how consumers are actually starting to consume entertainment, because, it could be in the theater, it could be, at home on a beautiful, what is that, an 80-inch TV screen right there? Mm-hmm. So if you think about that, and like, and can analyze that, that's a good factor to sort of analyze.
Camille?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the challenge for us as representatives is, being across and staying on top of, the changing distribution landscape and what the opportunities are for our clients. But I think, at the end of the day, it really just comes down to the strength of the material. And, I think increasingly you really, need to be able to stand out in a crowded marketplace. So it's really, the strength of the content and the quality of the filmmaking.
I forgot to add an Apple too, for example. They're gonna enter.
They're in the space. Yeah.
I mean, I would say that it's slightly paradoxical, because on the one hand, there never been more ways to see work and more communication between different cultures and societies, and sort of that exchange of ideas, made possible by the information communication technology revolution. But at the same time, there's so much content that it's very hard to, differentiate and prioritize that. And the role of critics is diminishing, and, the tyranny of Rotten Tomatoes and other metrics-based, systems that are sort of predictive software, all these implications that I think have yet to be understood. I think, one thing that's obvious is that the way people consume media is fundamentally changing, and that those sea changes are kind of in their infancy. A young person doesn't see any difference between watching something on their phone or going to a movie theater, but at the same time the primacy of the theatrical experience is undeniable. So it's a very confusing time. in entertainment and in geopolitics. So the future is uncertain.
That's for sure. And to that, I think I would add this sort of stitching a thought from the morning's panel. If you haven't already started to develop your audience, start now, because you need to bring your audience with you, and that matters a great deal. I want to thank you three who have exhibited so much passion. These people care so much about film. That is just, I find it really moving, and it's been an honor to be up here with you. So thank you all so much. And thank
right back at you. We salute you.
Thank you, and we thank all of you for the extraordinary passion that you have in your filmmaking community. And we'll see you around. Have a good afternoon. Thank you. Good stuff. Can we get a group photo? Sure. Against the brick wall?
Yeah, brick wall.
All in all, it's just